Okay, Boker Tov, welcome back, everyone. So, just a quick housekeeping note. Next week, there will not be a shiur, neither Wednesday or Thursday. I'm away next week, so there will not be a shiur, any Gemara shiur next week. But the following week, we will, Bezrat Hashem, be back on track. Okay, we looked yesterday, we saw the Mishnah on Daf Chaf Aleph Amud Bet. How are you on mute?
Sunday, you'll have a shiur.
Yeah, Sunday as regular, but no Gemara shiur next week. Okay.
Okay.
Beseder. So we're on Daf Chaf Aleph Amud Bet. The Mishnah, the first Mishnah we saw, right? We said Beit Shammai Amrim Lo Yachem Adam Chamin Al Aglav Elam Ken Rin L'Shtiyah. Beit Shammai says you cannot heat. Again, when you're heating water, you are performing the malacha of cooking, and here it is done not for an ochel nefesh purpose. Therefore, Beit Shammai say you can only do it if the water is fit for drinking. Tosfot added on, as we saw yesterday. Beit Shammai means to say only if you're actually drinking the water, because then you're performing the melacha of ochel nefesh. Beit Shammai don't hold by mitoch. Beit Hillel, on the other hand, right? Beit Hillel matirin. In other words, Beit Hillel say you can heat up water to wash your feet. You don't need to drink it. We say mitoch. We discussed yesterday, why is it that Beit Hillel say you can only heat up water for your feet, your face and your hands as well, but not for your entire body, either according to Tosfot, because that is not a melacha which is shaveh lechol nefesh, and therefore that's not permitted. And we said under today's circumstances where it is shaveh lechol nefesh, seemingly it would be permitted. Or according to the Rambam, who says this is because of Gzerat HaMerchatzot. Sorry, even if we say that today it's Shaveh L'Kol Nefesh, we're still not going to allow one to heat water on Yom Tov to wash one's whole body. We have the reason of the Rambam as well, but we saw the nafkamina would be regarding washing in water that was heated before Yom Tov. Once we say Shaveh L'Kol Nefesh, that would be mutar. Okay, and there are other considerations as well in terms of practical halacha. We spent a long time on that yesterday. I'm not going to repeat it now. And then the second part of the Mishnah was, we said, Oseh Adam Medura Mitchamem Kenegda. Person can make a fire in order to keep warm. Okay, so the Gemara here asks the question. It says, Ibayilahu, Hai Medura, Man Ktanila. When we have the second case of the Mishnah, talking about this Medura, who is the author? Meaning, whose view is this? Is this going according to the view of Beit Hillel, or is this even according to Beit Shammai? Right? Says the Gemara, Divra kol hi v'shani lahu lebeit Shammai ben anat kol gufo la'anat eval echad. Right? Do we say one possibility? Do we say Divra kol hi? This is according to everybody, meaning even according to Beit Shammai, it's allowed. V'shani lahu lebeit Shammai ben anat kol gufo la'anat eval echad. Okay, meaning that there is a difference according to Beit Shammai between if your entire body is going to get benefit or it's just one eva. Remember, Beit Shammai said in the Mishnah you can't heat up water in the first case, so you can't heat up water just to wash your feet. Okay, you can only do it if you're heating up the water to drink. So therefore, that they don't allow, but to make a fire to heat yourself up, that they do allow. So Rashi says, "Anat kol gufo damya la'ochel nefesh." Once your entire body is getting benefit, so that's similar to ochel nefesh, as we saw in the Rambam. So that's one possibility. That's one possibility that the second line of the Mishnah says, "Se'adam medura" is according to everybody, even according to Beit Shammai. Or alternatively, says the Gemara, "Dilma Beit Hillel ktanila, aval Beit Shammai lo." Right? In other words, or we could say, no, it's just continuation. Just like we had a machloket in the first half of the Mishnah, so too we have machloket in the second half, that this is according to Beit Hillel, but Beit Shammai disagree. Okay, and the answer is, so that's the question. Says the Gemara, Tashma, we have the answer. Beit Shammai omrim lo yaseh adam medura v'yitchamim kenegda Beit Hillel matirin. Okay, so we have explicitly in the Braita that Beit Shammai says you cannot make the fire to warm yourself up, and Beit Hillel allow it. So therefore, the conclusion is that second part of the Mishnah, that is only according to Beit Hillel. Okay, the Mishnah doesn't write again. Beit Shammai is this, Beit Hillel this. But once we said Beit Hillel matirin, and then we say Oseh adam medura mitchamim kenegda, that is Beit Hillel's opinion as well. Okay. Next Mishnah. Now this Mishnah lists three things which Rabban Gamliel was machmir like Beit Shammai. So now we've seen lots of different machlokot, Beit Hillel, Beit Shammai. This Mishnah is a little bit different. This is telling us a number of cases where Rabban Gamliel would paskin like Beit Shammai. So the Mishnah says as follows: Shlosha dvarim, Rabban Gamliel machmir k'divrei Beit Shammai. There are these three cases where Rabban Gamliel is going to be machmir like Beit Shammai. Says Rashi Gimel dvarim mefalesh tama bigmara. I was going to explain what's the reason why these three things. Okay. Case number one, he says En tomnin et hachamin lekatchila beyom tov. Okay, we cannot see everything's connected, right? In the Subam Rabbanan Shiur, we're currently studying Hatmana, insulation. So there you go. This is another shameless pitch. So the Mishnah says, Beit Shammai say, Ein tomnin et hachamin lekatchila beyom tov. We don't do Hatmana. We don't insulate hot food, hot water, or hot food to keep it hot on Yom Tov. Okay, what he's talking about is a case where you're insulating it on Yom Tov for Shabbat. When Yom Tov falls out on Erev Shabbat, right? Can you do that? So Beit Shammai says no. We're going to discuss the Gemara will. I'm sure you're all thinking immediately. But Rashi told us the Gemara will explain. Rashi told us the Gemara will explain the reasons because there's something that jumps out. I'm sure you're all thinking, wait a minute, what's the problem with doing Hatmana on Yom Tov for Shabbat? Because you have an Erev Tavshilin. You have an Erev Tavshilin. You're allowed to prepare. You're allowed to cook from Yom Tov to Shabbat. So Kal Vachomer, we should be allowed to do Hatmana as well. Okay, the Gemara is going to give three different answers. So that is the first case. Second case, ein zukfin et menorah. Okay, you can't stand up, place a menorah. Okay, Rashi says ein zukfin mashma im nafla menorah shamatechet. We have this metal menorah that fell over. Ein zukfin u'meshivin. We can't put it back in its place. Again, I was going to explain why. And right now we're starting to understand. Remember, whenever Rashi says bigmar mefaresh la, or it will be explained later on. Obviously, it will be explained later on. Why does Rashi need to tell me that? Generally speaking, Rashi needs to tell me that because there's a kasha, there's a difficulty that jumps out at me. So when I'm reading these cases and they seem obvious, I don't understand why they can't why you can't do it. So that's what Rashi told me. Don't worry, the Gemara will explain. In case number 3, says Rabban Gamliel that he paskins like Beit Shammai. He says ve'en ofin pitin glitzin ela rekikin. Okay, he says when you're baking, all these are to do with Yom Tov. When you're baking on Yom Tov, he says, don't make pitin gritzin. These are sort of like a thick sort of bread. Only make a flat bread, sort of we're not talking about Pesach, right? But only make a thin sort of bread. Rashi explains, pitin gritzin kikarot avim mishum tircha. Okay, it's a very, very thick sort of loaves. It's a tircha. It's a tircha to make them. If we keep it simple, make something small. Chalalin shofin ala gechalim. Okay. So then says the Mishnah, so the Rabban Gamliel, Mimehen Shabbat Abba lo ayu ofin pitin glitzin el kikin. So says Rabban Gamliel, who said we hold like Beit Shammai in these 3 cases. He says I have a tradition, I have a Masoret from Beit Abba that they would always only make these pitin glitzin and these thick breads, and they wouldn't make these thin breads. That's what they always did. So Chachamim said to him, Mana se lebeit avicha. Chachamim say that's very nice that they did that in your, but just because your father did that, that's going to obligate all of us. You know, it reminds me of the joke where they say there was a woman who had a way that she would always cook. You know, she would always take the meat, you know, and cut off a piece and put it all into the parts, and take the second piece and put it into the second part. You know, this she would do. And one day I thought, ask, why do we always cook like that? She says, that's the minhag we have. That's why my mother used to do it. It's like, okay. So she goes to her grandmother. She says, why is it you always take the piece of meat and you put it into the second pot? She says, the pot wasn't big enough. Okay, so that's not something that you have to keep. But in this case, he wasn't doing it because the pot wasn't big enough. In this case, he was doing it because he held that was the halacha. But the Chachamim say to Rabban Gamliel, the fact that they say mana sela beit avicha shu machmilin el atzmam, that's a chumrah. Okay, they want to keep that chumrah very nice, but that's not something that has to be halacha for everybody. Right? Ayu machmirin el atzmam umekilin lekol Yisrael liotofin patin gritzin v'chalalim. Okay. You have the minhag. Somebody wants to take on a chumrah for themselves. Okay, but not everybody has to. Not everybody has to incorporate that. Okay, so those are the 3 cases of the Mishnah. Case number 1 was talking about hatmana on Yom Tov for Shabbat. Case number 2 was about standing up this menorah, and case number 3 was relating to the bread that you bake on Yom Tov. So says the Gemara now, says, Hey Chidami, what's the case? Our first case of talking about whether you can do hatmana on Yom Tov for Shabbat. Says the Gemara, what's the case? Id anach eruvei tavshilin ma'itama de Beit Shammai. Vida lo anach eruvei tavshilin ma'itama de Beit Hillel. Says the Gemara essentially, yami ma'in nafshach. Says if you've got an eruv tavshilin, so you're allowed to prepare from Yom Tov to Shabbat. You're allowed to do whatever you need to do. You're allowed to cook. So all the more, of course, you can do hatmana. So if you have an eruv tavshilin, then I don't understand why Beit Shammai say it's asur. And if you don't have an eruv tavshilin, well, then I don't understand why Beit Hillel say it's mutter. Because if you don't have an eruv tavshilin, you can't do any preparation, right? That's the question again. What's the case? If you've placed an eruv tavshilin, so then my tama de Beit Shammai. So what's Beit Shammai's reason for saying that it's asur? If you don't have an eruv tavshilin, my tama de Beit Hillel. And what's Beit Hillel's reason for saying that it's mutter? Okay, so we're going to suggest 3 different answers in the Gemara. Answer number 1. Amar Rav Huna, Leolam ei malacha shelo aniach eruvei tavshilin. Says Rav Huna, actually, you don't have eruv tavshilin. Okay, there is no eruv tavshilin. So then I understand why Beit Shammai say it's asur, but why would Beit Hillel say it's mutar? The answer is ukdei chayav shalolei Rabbanan. Rav Huna says kadei chayav Rabbanan allowed. In other words, Rabbanan allowed you to prepare the minimum, meaning remember, eruv tavshilin is a requirement midrabanan, midoraita. You're allowed to cook from Yom Tov to Shabbat, but Rabbanan came along and said the reason you're allowed to midoraita, if you remember, is essentially probably because of the svara of Hoel. We say that since at any point guests may arrive and you may need to make extra food for them, therefore you're allowed to cook extra food on Yom Tov, and therefore you can cook food on Yom Tov to Shabbat. But we saw at the beginning of this parak, Rabbanan said, no, that's not enough. We have to remember Shabbat, we have to remember Yom Tov, etc. And we have to prepare the eruv tavshilin. But Rav Huna says that that is not a complete limitation, meaning Rabbanan said, if you don't have an eruv tavshilin, we don't want you to starve. Okay, we want you to have food on Shabbat, so you can make the bare minimum. We'll see exactly what that is. You can make the bare minimum without the eruv tavshilin. If you have the eruv tavshilin, so then you can make the schnitzel and the soup and the potatoes and you can do the whole thing. But if it's just otherwise, you're just going to have the bare minimum. So that's what it means. Kadei chayav shar leRabbanan. Rav Huna letamei. What's the source? Let's explain. Rav Huna said, "Rav Huna mi shelo aniach eruv tavshilin ofin lo pat achat umavshlin lo k'dera achat." Okay, Rav Huna says somebody who doesn't have an eruv tavshilin, so he can have one baked good, one challah, right? Umavshlin lo k'dera achat. He can have one dish over the page, right top of the next daf. Umadlikin lo taner, and you can light one candle. Okay, that's what Rav Huna says. You haven't made your eruv tavshilin. You kadei chayav one dish, one baked good, and one candle. That's it. Mishum Rabbi Yitzchak amru af tzolin dag katan. Rabbi Yitzchak says no, not just that. The bare minimum. You have to have some fish, right? What's the Shabbos? That herring, right? You got to have something. You got to have a little fish that you can roast or whatever. That's also included as kadei chayav. Tanya nami achi. מי שלא הניח עירובי תבשילין אופין לו פת אחת וטומנים לו קדרה אחת ומדליקין לו את הנר ומחממים לו קיטון אחד ויש אומרים אף צולין לו דג קטן. Okay, so we have a brighter that says similarly, somebody doesn't have an עירוב תבשילין, can bake one baked good, right? You have טומנים לו קדרה אחת, you can, you have it. Maybe this is why we have this brighter, because Yard mentions explicitly Tomnin lo k'dera achat. You can insulate, you do hatmana of your k'dera, right? You can light the candle, and you can have a bit of hot water, and you can have some fish. Okay, fish is very, very important. Okay, so have a look at Tosfot. Tosfot, at the top of Daf Chaf Bet Amud Aleph, mentions something interesting. Now, notice in the implication in the Braita when we say that Kadei Chayav includes cooking and baking and lighting a candle. Okay, so the implication of that is that really the part of the Eruv Tavshilin is going to be for lighting your candles, lighting your Shabbos candles, obviously before Shabbat on Yom Tov. So Tosfot says, yeah, מכאן משמע שצריך להזכיר בברכת עירובי תבשילין, יש שלי לבישולי ולאפויה ולהדלוקה. Okay, we have a big machloket in the Rishonim when we say the nusach. We have the bracha, we have the nusach of the Eruv Tavshilin. What do we say, right? Because when you lift up the Eruv and you say, with this Eruv I'm going to be allowed to cook and to bake, etc., do you say, and to light the candle? Is that part of the nusach or is that not part of the nusach? So Tosfot says from here, it's implied that we do say it. He says, ואם בשביל הדלקה לא התנה, משמע דאסור להדליק לו רק נר אחד. Okay, he says that the implication here is that we're not for the Eruv Tavshilin. There's really a special leniency that you can only light one candle. מדחזינא דוצח להזכיר הדלוקי נר, משמע דאסור נמי שלא ידליח, שלא הניח להדליק לו רק נר אחד. In other words, you can only light the one candle, but if you had the Eruv Tavshilin, you could light more, and therefore part of the so Tosfot wants to prove from there that part of the nusach of the Eruv is that you can that you say about lighting candle. Okay, but anyway, so
Rabbi,
that is
let's say he didn't say nowadays he didn't say lat luke nera, but he continued with the text that says and last really called surachana have to do everything. So everything includes lighting candles, right? So that would also include that lighting the candle in their time if that was the text they had.
Yeah. So that's right. I mean, there are different. So there's a big machloket, yeah. But essentially, Lamaisa, that's what we say. We say to do whatever needs to be done on Yom Tov, and therefore we assume that either way the candle is included. I mean, again, the machloket is the one that says you don't need to say it would say that you can light the candle even without the eruv. So in any event, it's okay. Okay, so that is answer number one. Again, our question was, why does Beit Shammai say that you can't do Hatmana from Yom Tov to Shabbat? Okay, so answer number one was, he's talking about a case where you don't have an Eruv Tavshilin. And Beit Hillel says, well, Rav Huna says that you can do Kedei Chayav, you can do the minimal amount, but don't do Hatmana according to Beit Shammai. Okay, answer number two, we are now about 6-7 lines down from the top, Daf Chaf Bet Amud Aleph. Rav Amar Leolam She'eniach. Rav says, no, we're talking about a case where you did have an Eruv Tavshilin. Okay? V'shani Hatmana, but Hatmana is different. So Rav essentially is saying you have an Eruv Tavshilin, but what Beit Shammai is teaching you is an Eruv Tavshilin allows you to cook, and it allows you to bake, and it allows you to light your candles, and it allows you to do everything, but it does not allow you to do Hatmana. Why is that? So לעולם שניח ושני התמנה, דמוכה מילתא דהדתא דשבתא כעביד. Because Hatmana is different. Because Hatmana, it's clear and it's obvious that you're doing it for Shabbat. In other words, all the other things that you're doing on Yom Tov, it could be that you're doing it for Yom Tov as well. You have the Eruv Tavshilin, you're cooking on Yom Tov, but it's not so obvious that it's explicitly preparation for Shabbat, whereas Hatmana, that is not the case. Now, Itvei Abaye. Abaye has a very, very strong challenge on this, of what Rava says, because we've already seen this in the Gemara. You may remember, we saw it on Daf Yud Zayin, Amud Bet. Chananya Omer, Beit Shammai Omrim ein ofin אלא אם כן ערב בפת, ואין מבשלין אלא אם כן ערב בתבשיל, ואין טומנין אלא אם כן היו לו חמין טמונין מערב יום טוב. Okay, so the question was, we saw that there was a machloket between Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai as to how specific the Eruv Tavshilin has to be. Do we say that right, you have an Eruv, whatever it is, and that allows everything? Or do we say, no, it only allows for that specific category? So according to Beit Shammai, we say if you have a cooked food, then you can cook. And if you have a baked food, then you can bake. It's not that if you have a cooked food, you can bake, or a baked food, you can cook, or vice versa, right? That's why that's one of the reasons why the general practice nowadays is that you have a cooked food and a baked good. But we saw, so Beit Shammai says explicitly, right? They say if you want to bake, you need a baked good. Right? You can't cook unless you have a cook. And then they said, and they said you can't do hatmana unless you have something mutman from Erev Yom Tov. So wait a minute. So Abai says to Rava, you're telling me the Beit Shammai says that Hatmana is not included as part of Eruv Tavshilin. What are you talking about? Right? We have explicitly, Hanania says the name of Beit Shammai that part of the Eruv is Hatmana. Okay? So says, Yulo Chamin Tmunin. Mi ha'avid. Ve'af agav demuchach melta de'adata de Shabbat ka'avid. Right? So he says, in other words, you had Chamin Tmunin, and even though it's obvious, you're telling me that Hatmanami makes it obvious that it's for Shabbat. Okay, it's obvious that it's for Shabbat, but nonetheless, that is part of their Eruv Tavshilin, and that is allowed. Okay, so therefore Abaye rejects Rava's answer, so he has to say something else. It's Elamar Abaye kegon she'erav lazeh v'lo erav lazeh. Okay, again answering our question. So therefore, why would Beit Shammai say? Why would Beit Shammai say that you can't do hatmana for from Yom Tov to Shabbat? So Abaye builds on his answer, builds on his challenge, right? If we saw specifically, Hanania said in the opinion of Beit Shammai that you need to have performed that specific action in order to allow for the eruv. So you had an eruv tavshilin, but you had an eruv tavshilin. You had a cooked food, you had a baked good, you didn't have anything that was mutman, you didn't have anything that was insulated, and therefore you aren't allowed to insulate. Right? That's what Abai says. According to Beit Shammai. Right? You had something, you had the eruv regarding cooking, but you did not have the eruv regarding hatmana. That is according to the opinion of Hananya in the view of Beit Shammai. Okay, so those are our three answers. So to summarize, we said, Rabban Gamliel says, one of the three things where I hold like Beit Shammai is regarding the Lachav Hatmana, that I say that you are not allowed to perform Hatmana from Yom Tov to Shabbat. So the Gemara is perplexed. Do we have an Eruv Tavshilin or do we not have an Eruv Tavshilin? So three answers. One answer is we don't have an Eruv Tavshilin. So we understand Beit Shammai, and it's only Beit Hillel says you can perform the minimum, but you can't do whatever preparation you want. Answer number two was, yes, we have an, so that was if we don't have an Eruv Tavshilin. Answer number two was, we do have an Eruv Tavshilin, but Beit Shammai holds that Hatmana is not part of the Eruv Tavshilin. Answer number three was, we do, but we don't have an Eruv Tavshilin. We have it for the purposes of cooking or the purposes of baking, but we don't have it for the purposes of Hatmana, and that is according to Beit Shammai Shita, the way Hananya explained it, that you need for that specific action which you want to do. That's what you need as part of the Eruv. Okay. So that was case number one. Now case number two, we said v'ein zokfin et menorah. Okay, you can't lift up this menorah. So what are we talking about over here? Maika avid, says the Gemara. Maika, what have you done? The menorah fell down. You picked it back up. What's the big deal? Amar Rav Chinana bar Bisna hacha. Okay, so it's not just any menorah, it's a menorah of chuliyot. Sort of has like metal chains. And what happened is, says Rashi, kshenaflu nifradu chuliyotea. The different parts, the different pieces of the menorah came apart. So when you lift it up, you're not just lifting it up, you're putting it back together. So you're essentially performing an act which is similar to building. Okay? So therefore, and what's the machloket? Okay, the michze kevoneh, it looks like building. The Beit Shammai savri yesh binyan b'kelim, uBeit Hillel savri ein binyan b'kelim. Okay. Right, the Bach adds in the way he changes the second part. He says to binyan b'kelim or stira b'kelim. But essentially, so we have a machloket Rachas, and here we see machloket between Beit Hillel and Beit Shammai. When we talk about binyan, okay, if you think about the binyan that took place in the Mishkan, and you think about the classic melacha of binyan and stira, of building and destroying, we're generally talking about something which is mechubar lakarka, something that is attached to the ground, right? You build a house, that is building. Okay, but if you have a kelim, you have a small object that you put together or take apart, so that is not going to be that building in the classical sense. That's what we call binyan b'kelim. We have a machloket whether we say the malachav binyan applies to kelim or not. So Beit Shammai savri yesh binyan b'kelim. Beit Shammai there is binyan b'kelim. Beit Hillel savri ein binyan b'kelim. They say there is no binyan b'kelim, but in stira b'kelim. And so too there is no binyan and there is no stira when it comes to kelim, and therefore Beit Hillel said there wouldn't be no issue regarding this menorah. Okay. Ula ikla levei Rav Yehuda kam shmae zakaf le shraga. Okay, so here now we have a story which goes as follows. Ula came to the house of Rav Yehuda, and his shmai, his attendant, got up, and he what did he do? Right, zakaf le shraga. He lit he lifted up the candle for him. Okay. And again, we have to remember when we're talking about candles, we're talking about candles in the days of the Mishnah and the Gemara, which are not like the wax candles that we have. But remember, you imagine you have this sort of clay kibul, you have the holder with the oil inside and the wick. And whenever you lift it up and whenever you move it around, so that's going to cause the oil to move, and it may cause the candle to light or to go out, etc. So that was the situation.
Heinz House has got a very interesting picture of that. It shows a regular post, and attached to it, like 3 or less, if you wish, candles sticking up, and you can turn them down, turn them up.
Can you show us?
It's very, I don't know, I'll try, but let me just get rid of this junk here. Okay. Probably show it upside down. Yeah, just a second, let me get up. Not that easy. Just a second.
Okay, it's okay, Moshe. If it's difficult, don't worry.
All right, all right. Oy.
This is an interactive show.
Yeah. I don't know if it can be seen. You see it?
No, we can see the text. Don't worry about it. It's okay. We can see the text
All right.
down. But
Very interesting, though. Very big combination of things.
we're coming up to Purim. It's V'na'afochu. Okay.
Oh.
So, in any event, so we lifted up this candle, and then so it says, so Zakav le'shlaga itzvei Rav Yehuda le'ula hanoten shemen baner chayav mishum mav'il v'mistapek mimeno chayav mishum mechaber. Right? If you place oil into the candle on Shabbat, so you're going to be chayav because of mav'ir, because you're lighting the candle. And if you take, we have a whole discussion that's going to come up about this, but if you take oil away from the candle, you are essentially extinguishing. So if you're lifting it up and you're moving it around, that's going to be a problem. What does Shamash did? So he said to him, he says, "You're right. I didn't tell him to do it. It was against my wishes that he's acting in this way." Okay, so we'll stop there. So we'll get up to the 2 dots. We're about halfway down the page of Chaf Bet Amud Aleph. It's a good place to stop. We will pick up from there again, not next week, but the following week. Bezrat Hashem. Everybody have a wonderful day. But shalom.
Thank you very much.
Good Shabbos. Thank you.
Good Shabbos.